Hello everyone, my name is Beby Shakira Valeria. Here I will discuss 3 articles about international humanitarian law. First article is about an international humanitarian law review of the Syrian government February 2018 attacks on Eastern Ghouta. In general, this I will review first background to the conflict, outline the situation and political context in Syria, particularly in Eastern Ghouta in February 2018, as well as the impact of the attacks on the civilian population. Second, provision of international humanitarian law describes the key role of EHL relevant in non-international conflict, particularly regarding civilian protection, restriction on the use of weapons, and prohibition on disproportionate attacks. This includes the Geneva Convention, Additional Protocol 2, and legal principles such as distinction between combatants and civilians, proportionality, and necessity. Third, international liability discuss the Syrian government potential liability under international law if gross violations are proven, as well as a mechanism for accountability such as through the UN Human Rights Council, the International Criminal Court, or other mechanisms. Fourth, implication for civilian protection in non-international conflicts outline the impact of the attack on the development of civilian protection in the context of ongoing conflict and how this case can serve as lesson in the application of EHL similar conflict in the future. My two article is about legal analysis of the armed conflict between Palestine and Israel from the perspective of international law, humanitarian law. In general, a review for the first is a background to the conflict, present a brief history and development of the armed conflict between Israel and Palestine, including repeat escalation of violence, the situation in the occupied territories, and the impact of this conflict on civilians on both sides. Second, relevant international humanitarian law provision outline the main principle of EHL applicable in international and non-international conflict, including the Geneva Convention and Additional Protocol, as well as legal principles such as distinction between combatants and civilians, proportionality, precaution in attacks, and the prohibition of collective punishment. Third, status of the occupied territories and applicable law discuss the legal status of occupied territories such as Gaza and the West Bank, and how this affects the application of EHL. In this regard, the article may also review Israel's obligation as an occupying power under international law, particularly in terms of the protection of the civilian protection. Fourth, international responsibility and accountability mechanism discuss how violation of EHL can be lead to international responsibility for the parties involved, as well as the mechanism available to address war crimes such as International Criminal Court, the UN Security Council, and Special Commission on Inquiry. The third article is about juridical analysis of the occurrence of armed conflict between Ukraine and Russia from the perspective of international humanitarian law. Broadly speaking, this article will cover first background to the conflict, examines the root cause of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine from political and military tension to its escalation into armed conflict involving the invasion and occupation territory. Second, analysis of Russian and Ukraine military action. Examine military action taken on both sides, including the use of weapons, attacks on civilian infrastructures such as hospitals and power plants, and the impact of the conflict on civilians. In this case, the article may address whether there were violations of EHL principles such as disproportionate attacks or action that directly target civilian population. Third, international legal responsibility and liability. Examine international accountability mechanism in the event of severe violation, including the possibility of referring the case to the International Criminal Court, the role of the UN Security Council, as well as international investigative mechanisms that identify war crimes or other EHL violations. Fourth, implication for the protection of civilians. Assess the impact of this conflict on efforts to protect civilians in conflict zones and how the Ukraine and Russia can may strengthen or weaken of the application of EHL in similar future conflicts. So all these three articles have in common that they discuss armed conflict from the perspective of international humanitarian law, but each has a unique focus relating to the context of the conflict discussed. First legal principle discussed. All three this article discuss EHL principles such as decision, proportionality, and precaution, but with different impacts according to the conflict context. In the Syrian and Palestinian case, violations against civilian population are the main concern, while in the Ukraine and Russia case, there is a focus on the laws of occupation and invasion. Second, legal implication and enforcement challenge. The Syrian and Palestinian conflicts face challenge in the application of the EHL due to the complex status of the conflicts and the involvement of non-state actors. On the other hand, the Ukraine and Russia conflict highlight challenge relates to EHL enforcement in a large-scale conflict with two sovereign states that could affect the international legal order. So that's all. Thank you. See you.